It's almost 6:30 and you're watching East Midlands Today. Tonight, after the worst floods in our region for years, we look at what happened and where we go from here. 6 weeks ago, the East Midlands suffered a deluge which saw homes and businesses flooded and chaos on our roads. For the first time tonight, we reveal the cost of the floods to one of our worst hit councils.
We're estimating at the moment about £20 million. That's on roads, culverts, bridges and other structures across the county.
And in other news this evening, the unidentified body found just outside a Leicestershire village. Police say their inquiries are complex and likely to be lengthy. And the moment a man's arrested in a police operation to fight drugs and knife crime at a city railway station.
Hello and welcome to East Midlands Today with me, Naftej Johal. I'm here at Loughborough University as we try to find answers to the key questions about the recent floods in our region. The cost of them, of course, keeps stacking up and the cleanup still continues. This place, Loughborough University, has pioneered software which predicts the risks of flooding. And later we'll be speaking to an expert about how to prevent more people from suffering from floods. But before we look ahead, let's remind ourselves of what happened just a few weeks ago when parts of the East Midlands were hit by the worst floods in living memory.
It's been pouring. Villages have been deluged across our region where several flood warnings are in place.
The water was about halfway up my shin as I first got here. Tried coming in through the front door, but all the floor had lifted, so the door wouldn't open.
First tonight, a woman's body has been found in a flooded river in Derbyshire as rising water levels continue to cause major problems across the region.
There was heavy rain yesterday before the high sides gave way and slid down behind the homes.
We won't feel safe with what we seen last night. It was horrendous.
Tonight, back in Matlock, the Prime Minister visited to meet emergency service personnel and see some of the damage.
There's been flash flooding across the region during a day of torrential downpours. People's homes have been flooded, roads inundated and communities cut off.
It's unprecedented levels of water. There's been a tragic loss of life. So for those parts of the country that are seeing this extraordinary weather event, yes, it is a national emergency and we need to see a change in how we manage water.
Some extraordinary images there, a snapshot of just how badly the East Midlands was affected by the floods. And tonight we can reveal how much it's actually cost for one of our local authorities. Derbyshire County Council has told us that flood damage to the county's roads has costed £20 million. Now, the recent torrential rain caused some road surfaces to be completely swept away, and people in one village, Abney, are facing a 26-mile detour due to the damage. The County Council is now hoping the government will step in with financial help. And here's what the Deputy Leader of Derbyshire County Council told us earlier today.
We're estimating at the moment about £20 million. That's on roads, culverts, bridges and other structures across the county.
Just put that in context, how much do you normally spend on maintenance?
Well, if you put that into context, our annual budget for highways maintenance is £17.5 million a year, so you can see the impact that's going to have on the taxpayers of Derbyshire.
Now, you probably can't quite make it out on this globe, but Matlock is somewhere around here, and it was one part of Derbyshire which was severely disrupted by the flooding last month. The River Derwent, of course, burst its banks after heavy rainfall. Businesses were swamped, main roads were closed. You might remember that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited the town too, famously mopping up in the Specsavers in the town. Now, campaigners say that the flood risk means that plans for 400 homes in the town shouldn't go ahead. But the developers say they've done a full environmental impact. Mike O'Sullivan now reports on the flooding fears on the Matlock Wolds.
Runoff running riot. A couple trying to stop floodwater getting into their house in 2016. They live in the Matlock Wolds, high above Matlock town and about a mile from the River Derwent. Campaigners are trying to stop a 400-home development on this greenfield site, which they say acts as a natural sponge.
We are worried for the whole of Matlock because this runs into Matlock now, causing flooding every year. So to build nearly 500 houses across this area will be a catastrophe.
Another resident had to bucket away water from his back door in mid-November.
I've lived there 19 years and it's gradually got worse and worse and worse, seen through climate change. But if they build 400 houses behind my house, it's going to devastate, the water runoff is going to devastate my house.
The campaigners say the flooding in Matlock around November the 8th has heightened their concerns. The River Derwent burst its banks after a month's rain in 2 days. The main shopping street was hit, and the Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited. When he came back to the John Smedley fashion firm recently, he was collared about the Wolds development.
I did actually email him a few months ago before, so I asked him why he hadn't replied. And it was like, oh, I'm sorry, Julie, I'm sorry, laughing. But what he did say was that if they got through, and Sarah Downs got through, to get in touch with Sarah.
The MP?
And take it up, yes, and take it up with Sarah, which is exactly what we're going to do this weekend.
There are a lot of homes on the edge of this site already, but the developer William Davis of Loughborough says it's very aware and sympathetic to local concerns about flooding. It says it submitted a full impact study, including the use of sustainable urban drainage systems to control runoff. One of the campaigners at 97 has seen it all before.
I've been working since 1969 to try to stop it being built on. I think there have been about 8 applications. They've all ended in refusal, and there's been a fight over many of them.
The residents don't yet know when Derbyshire Dales District Council will discuss things. Matlock Town Council has already objected to more houses on the Wolds. Mike O'Sullivan, BBC East Midlands Today, Derbyshire.
Well, let's stay on this subject of building on floodplains, because joining me now is Dr. Lee Bosher from Loughborough University, who is an expert in this field. Lee, first of all, just tell everybody what your title is, because I do love what your job title says.
Yeah, I'm a reader in disaster risk management.
That is pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, now, I wonder if you could just briefly summarise your research. What have you been looking into?
So I've been looking into the sort of man-made or human-induced causes of disasters. Very often nature gets the blame for many disasters. So I've been looking at things such as planning and construction and the role of different stakeholders in how we can reduce disaster risks.
And what have you found?
So what we found is that very often when these so-called natural disasters are labelled that there's a lot of human-induced aspects, the way people build things, where they build things, which are actually fundamentally perhaps more important than the natural hazards themselves.
Is it possible to say, I know a lot of people will want to know this watching at home, how many houses are prone to flooding in the East Midlands?
Well, I did have a look at the Environment Agency data, and about 20% of the East Midlands region is prone to flooding. Within that, that's about 200,000 properties, which are homes to about 400,000 people, so it's pretty significant.
My goodness.
Yeah.
How many do you know are planned though for flood-prone areas? That's your area, isn't it?
Well, that's one thing that I've been looking at with some excellent sort of undergraduate and master's students. So we had a look at, it's quite difficult to know how many are planned at the moment, but we had a look at the data from 2015 to 2018. And in the East Midlands, there were just under 4,000 properties built in high flood risk areas, which is about 9% of the total amount of houses built in the East Midlands in that 3-year period.
And as somebody who knows a lot about this field, how does that make you feel knowing that so many homes are planned for flood-prone areas?
It does. It's rather frustrating. It does make me quite cross. It's particularly problematic as well that in most of those cases, property level flood protection measures aren't incorporated into the design, or the sites aren't particularly protected from floods. And also the people buying those houses don't always know that those houses are in a flood risk area.
Now, no conversation about extreme weather events can happen without talking about climate change, of course. What impact is climate change likely to have in the years to come on flooding, and especially here in the East Midlands?
Yeah, well, the predictions are that obviously we're going to see some sea level rise and perhaps increased storminess, which is going to be particularly problematic for the Lincolnshire coastline, which isn't going to be helped as well with the lack of funding that's perhaps going to be made available for maintaining and increasing the flood defences on the coast, but also increased rainfall activity in our towns and cities, increased surface flooding. So I think it's even been predicted that the amount of rainfall in the catchment could mean that at the moment 30,000 houses which are at risk of riverine flooding could be doubled in quite a short period to 60,000 houses.
I have to ask you very quickly as well then, are we likely to see the type of flooding that we've seen last month happen again?
Unfortunately, it's highly likely, and perhaps the situation's only going to get worse, unfortunately.
Okay, Lee, thank you very much. Even though that is a difficult note to end on, let's just go back to the studio where Anne will tell us a little bit more about what else has been happening across our region today.
I will indeed, Navtesh. Thank you for the